There were two brothers who grew up in the same narrow house, raised by the same tired parents, shaped by the same disappointments. They lost their father in the same week, because there was only one father to lose. They went to the same school, worked with the same hands, and carried the same family name through the same small town for their entire lives. Life gave them almost identical material to work with. By 70, they were unrecognizable from each other. One had become the kind of man people quietly sought out, not because he had answers, but because he had a way of sitting with your question until it changed shape. He held his opinions loosely, the way you hold something you are still examining. He laughed easily, most often at himself, and when he spoke about the past, even the painful parts, there was no bitterness in it, only a kind of settled understanding, as if he had finally managed to read a letter that had arrived many years too early. The other brother told the same 3 stories at every family gathering. Stories about who had wronged him, who had been given more, who had never apologized. His conclusions about life had been finished for a long time, sealed like jars in a dark cellar. He had lived just as long as his brother. He had endured just as much. And somehow he had learned almost nothing from any of it. Same years, same losses, same gray hair. Only one of them grew wise. And the difference between those 2 men is one of the most misunderstood truths about being human. Because somewhere along the way, all of us absorbed the same quiet promise, that wisdom comes with age. That time itself is the teacher. That if we simply keep living, understanding will eventually arrive on its own, like a pension we have been paying into all along. It won't. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why and what actually turns a life into wisdom. We believe in the equation without ever examining it. More years, more wisdom. It is built into our language, our fairy tales, our respect for elders, the very shape of our expectations. The old sage on the mountain, the grandmother who simply knows. We speak of wisdom as if it were sediment, something that settles in a person just because time has passed through them. But you have met old fools. So have I. You have met people with 70 years behind them and the emotional insight of a slammed door. People who survived enormous hardship and extracted nothing from it but resentment. People who are repeating the same relationship at 80 that they were repeating at 30, with different names in the same roles. And you have met the opposite, a young nurse who understands grief better than the philosophers she never read. A child of a chaotic home who, at 25, sees through human behavior with an accuracy that unsettles people twice her age. If time were the teacher, none of these people could exist. The old fool would be impossible. The young sage would be impossible. And yet every family, every workplace, every village has both. So the first thing we have to let go of is one of the most comforting beliefs we hold about the future, that we will automatically become wiser versions of ourselves. That understanding is on its way, on its own schedule, and all we have to do is wait. The philosopher John Dewey saw through this more than a century ago. He wrote, and this one sentence may be the most important sentence in this entire video: we do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. Listen to that again. We do not learn from experience. Experience is raw material. It is the unprocessed ore, the wheat still standing in the field. It becomes nothing. It feeds no one until something is done with it. And that something is not automatic. It is not guaranteed by the calendar. It is a deliberate act. And many people go to their graves never having performed it. And here is the part almost nobody says out loud. Aging without reflection does not leave us where we started. It often makes us worse. Because time does not simply pass through us, neutrally. Time repeats us. Every year we live inside a pattern. Without questioning it, the pattern grows deeper. Think of a path through tall grass. The first time you walk it, it barely leaves a trace. The 100th time, it is a trench. What we practice, we become, and most of us are practicing our defenses, our grievances, and our automatic conclusions every single day without knowing that we are practicing anything at all. This is why bitterness in old age is so common and so heavy. Bitterness is not what happens when life hurts you. Bitterness is what happens when life hurts you, and the hurt is never examined, only rehearsed. The bitter brother from our opening story did not tell his 3 stories because he had suffered more than his brother. He told them because the stories had never been allowed to change. He had turned his pain into a museum, and he was its only visitor, walking the same halls every day, keeping every exhibit perfectly preserved, dusting the frames of his oldest grievances with a devotion he never gave to anything living. Carl Jung watched this happen to the people around him, and he gave it words that still sting 100 years later. He observed that we step into the second half of life, wholly unprepared, carrying the assumptions of life's morning into its afternoon, where they no longer fit. The ambitions, the defenses, the certainties that carried us through our early years become, in his view, the very things that prevent us from growing in the later ones. What worked at 30 calcifies at 60. The armor becomes the prison, and there is a second, quieter mechanism at work. As we age, we accumulate evidence for whatever we already believe. If you concluded at 25 that people always leave, then every departure for the rest of your life files itself neatly into that folder, and every person who stayed gets forgotten because there was never a folder for them. Time does not correct our conclusions. Time confirms them. Unexamined experience is not a teacher. It is a lawyer, endlessly building the case we decided on long ago. This is the uncomfortable truth hiding inside the phrase, set in their ways. Nobody sets out to become rigid. Rigidity is simply what unreflected time does to a mind. It is the default setting. Wisdom is the exception, the thing that only ever happens on purpose. So if wisdom is not accumulated time, what is it? The ancient Greeks had a word for it that we have almost lost. Phronesis. Aristotle used it to describe something distinct from knowledge and distinct from cleverness. Practical wisdom. The ability to judge well in real, messy, particular situations. Not knowing facts, but knowing what matters here, now, with this person, in this moment. A brilliant scientist can lack it completely. A woman who never finished school can have it in abundance. And phronesis, Aristotle insisted, cannot be handed over in a lecture because it is not information. It is something closer to a craft. Judgment, shaped the way a potter's hands are shaped. Through contact with the material, through failure, through correction. Through experience, yes, but experience that has worked, not merely endured. Modern psychology has begun to map this ancient idea with new tools, and one discovery deserves its own quiet moment here. The psychologist Igor Grossmann and his colleagues studied how people reason about difficult life problems, and they confirmed something you have probably felt 100 times, but never named. We are dramatically wiser about other people's lives than about our own. Presented with a friend's dilemma, we suddenly see nuance. We consider several perspectives. We admit uncertainty. We think about the long run. presented with the identical dilemma in our own life, all of that evaporates. Grossmann called it Solomon's paradox, after the ancient king who dispensed legendary wisdom to everyone else, while his own life quietly fell apart. Now notice what this actually means. Wisdom is not a possession that some people have and others lack. It is a vantage point. The same person, the same mind, the same life experience becomes wise or blind depending on the distance from which it looks. Your wisdom is already in you. It is simply standing too close to your own life to see it, like a letter pressed directly against your eyes. And this is the key that unlocks everything else in this video. Because if wisdom is a vantage point, then the question is no longer, how long have you lived? The question is, have you learned to step back? Which brings us to the real answer, the this in the title. What actually makes people wise at any age is a practice made of 3 movements. None of them require gray hair. All of them require honesty. The first movement is reflection, and reflection is not the same as rumination. This distinction matters more than almost anything else you will hear today, because many people believe they reflect constantly, when what they actually do is ruminate. Rumination is replaying. It runs the same scene on a loop. The argument, the betrayal, the failure, same camera angle, same script, same ending. And it always arrives at the same place, pain and a verdict. Usually a verdict against someone else, sometimes a verdict against yourself. Either way, the case closes exactly where it closed last time. Reflection is something else entirely. Reflection changes the camera angle. It asks the questions the loop never asks. What was I protecting in that moment? What did I need that I could not say? What would this look like through their eyes? What does this situation have in common with the other situations I keep finding myself in? Rumination asks, why did this happen to me? And that is not really a question. It is a complaint wearing a question's clothing. Reflection asks, what is this asking me to understand? And then actually waits for an answer. Kierkegaard wrote that life can only be understood backwards, though it must be lived forwards. Most people hear that as resignation. It is not resignation. It is an instruction. The understanding does not happen by itself while you are facing forward. Someone has to turn around and do the understanding, deliberately, regularly, with a little courage. That turning around is reflection, and 10 honest minutes of it will teach you more than 10 unexamined years. The second movement is humility, the willingness to be updated. Socrates was named the wisest man in Athens for one reason only. He knew what he did not know. Everyone else in the city carried certainties. He carried questions. And that was not modesty as decoration. It was the entire method. A mind that already knows cannot learn. There is no room left inside it. In everyday life, humility means treating your conclusions about the world the way a good scientist treats a theory. Useful for now, and open for revision the moment reality disagrees. It means being able to say the sentences that rigid people cannot say. I was wrong about him. I have changed my mind. It was more complicated than I wanted it to be. I played a part in that too, and there is a feeling to watch for. You already know it. That small internal bristle when new information threatens an old conclusion. That flash of defensiveness before you have even finished hearing the sentence. That bristle is the exact spot where wisdom either grows or dies. The rigid mind defends the conclusion. The wise mind gets curious about the bristle. The third movement is distance, learning to become your own visitor. Remember Solomon's paradox. You already reason wisely about lives that are not yours. So the practice is almost embarrassingly simple. Borrow that distance for yourself. Grossmann's research pointed toward the same technique the Stoic philosophers discovered 2,000 years earlier. Step outside your own perspective on purpose. Speak to yourself in the third person, or ask honestly, if my closest friend brought me this exact situation, what would I see? What would I say to her? The moment you do this, something shifts. The fog of self-interest and fear thins out, and the wisdom that was always there becomes available to its owner. Journaling works for the same reason. So does an honest conversation with someone who loves you enough to disagree with you. So does simply imagining your situation as a scene from someone else's life. These are not tricks. They are all one and the same movement. Stepping far enough back from your own experience that it finally becomes visible. Because you cannot read a letter that is pressed against your eyes. Reflection, humility, distance, that is the machinery. That is what was running quietly, year after year, inside one brother, and never once inside the other. By the way, if this slower, deeper way of looking at life resonates with you, consider subscribing. This channel exists for exactly these conversations, the ones we usually have too late, because here is where the opening story earns its ending. The wise brother was not wise, because he suffered. Both of them suffered. He was not wise because he grew old. Both of them grew old. He was wise because, somewhere along the way, he began doing something with what happened to him. He turned his experiences over in his hands. He let his conclusions be corrected. He asked again and again, quietly and without an audience, what is this trying to teach me? What am I not seeing? What would this look like from the outside? His brother's museum stayed frozen. His own kept being rearranged. Paintings taken down, examined in better light, hung differently. Same collection, entirely different building. Erik Erikson, who spent his life studying how human beings develop, believed that the final task of a life is exactly this: to look back at the one life you actually lived, not the one you planned, and find a way to hold it with acceptance instead of despair. Integrity, he called it. And here's what is striking. The people who arrive at that acceptance do not arrive there by accident. They arrive because they have been practicing that gaze all along. The honest look backward, in small doses for years. The final reckoning is only unbearable to those who never rehearsed it. So no, growing older will not make you wiser. That is the hard news. And it is also, if you let it turn over once in your hands, some of the best news you have heard in a long time. Because it means wisdom was never on the other side of a waiting period. There is no age requirement. There is no minimum number of birthdays. There is only the practice, reflection instead of rumination, humility instead of certainty, distance instead of drowning. And that practice is available tonight to a 20-year-old and an 80-year-old alike in exactly equal measure. The years will pass either way. That part is not up to you. Whether they pass through you like water through a pipe or settle into you like rain into soil, that part is entirely up to you. Too soon old, too late wise. That is the old saying. This channel is named after, and it is usually spoken as a lament. It does not have to be one. Late is not the only option. Wise has no schedule. It only has a beginning. And the beginning is the next honest look you take at your own life. If this video gave you something to carry, a like helps this channel more than you know. And subscribing means you will not miss the conversations ahead. And I would truly love to hear from you in the comments. What is something you only understood long after it happened? and what finally made you see it. I read every answer. Until next time, take care of your mind. It is the only place you will ever live.